Hello and welcome to the lesson. Today we're going to sum up everything we have learned so far. Here you can see our already familiar table with American cities and their populations. Notice that the table isn't formatted yet. Let's add some formatting now. First, I'll set the width to 500 pixels using the width property. This will be the smallest possible width. If you enter a larger amount of text, the table will adjust its size automatically. The size of the table is okay, so let's move on and set the padding of the text from the inner border. To do that, I'll use the cell padding property and set the value to 5 pixels. I'd also like to use a different font, so I'll add the font family property and set the value to Arial. Next, I'd like to align the text to the middle. To do that, I'll use the text align property and set the value to center. When I refresh the browser, you can see that the text is now in Arial and is aligned to the center. Next, we'll add a heading to the table using the caption element. Create the element inside the table element and type population in the USA between the opening and the closing tag. The caption will display above the table and will be centered. If you want to display the caption under the table, you'll have to use the caption side CSS property. I'd like to try that, so I'll add this property inside the style element and set the value to bottom. As you can see, the caption moved under the table. I don't really like it, so I'll change the value to top and move the caption back. Of course, it's also possible to use the text align property and align the text either to the left or right side. However, I prefer having the text aligned to the middle, so I'll set the default value, which is center. Let's move on and focus on colors. I like the white and blue combination, so I'll use the background property to make the background of the heading blue. Using the color property, I'll also set the text color to white. As you can see, the colors have changed after we refresh the browser. Notice that the blue background is stretched through the whole table width. The caption could be a bit bigger, so I'll add the font size property and set the value to 20 pixels. This looks better. I'd also like to indent the caption from the border, so I'll add the padding property and set the value to 5 pixels. The blue background got slightly bigger after refreshing the browser. Let's also add colors to the rest of the table. I'll set the background of the TH elements to a darker shade of gray. To be precise, I'll specify the color in the hexadecimal syntax. The header cells now have a gray background. Now I'll set the background of the remaining cells to a lighter shade of gray. As you can see, the header cells and the content cells are clearly distinguished. I don't like the black border over here, so I'll delete the border attribute from the table element. I'll refresh the browser, and as you can see, the black border has disappeared. However, we can still see a thin white border. It's not actually a border, but the background of the table element. The thickness is determined by the padding between cells. To add padding to individual cells, we use the cell spacing property. If I set the value of this property to 10 pixels, the imaginary border gets thicker. What actually happened is that the padding between cells increased, and you see the background of the table element. To make the effect clearly visible, I'll set the table background to blue. I'll also lower the padding to 3 pixels to make the table look better organized. I think I preferred the white border, so I'll delete the blue background of the table. I'd like to have a blue border around the table, so I'll add the border property to the table element. I'll set the width to 1 pixel, and because I'd like to keep it simple, I'll set the border style to solid. Finally, I'll set the color to blue. Notice that the table is slightly wider than the caption. This is because each browser applies a slightly different default width to the caption element. To align the table and its caption equally in all web browsers, use CSS and set the width property of the caption element equal to the width of the table. In our case, that's 500 pixels. I'll refresh the browser, and as you can see, the caption and the table are now aligned equally. To finish off, I'll show you how to change the background of individually selected cells. To do that, we'll make full use of classes. I'll create a new class and name it Darker. I'll set the color equal to the header cells. Now I'll apply the class to a cell, for example to cell number 2. To do that, I'll simply add the class attribute and set the value to the name of the class, which in our case is darker. As you can see, the cell now has a dark gray background. This way it's possible to distinguish between even and odd rows or columns. I'll add the class to all cells in the row. I'll refresh the browser and you can see that the whole row is highlighted. This makes a nice effect with higher number of rows. To show you an example, I added some more rows with other cities. Notice that all even rows have the darker class applied. The result looks quite good, don't you think? Thank you for joining me today, and I'll look forward to seeing you the next time.